So it is the SEC Growth Senior Leaders Development Staff Meeting for November 9th. I'm going to announce that. Let's see, what do we have in the agenda for today? So I've got the first item. Reflecting on Q3 OKRs, I think we did relatively well. We achieved 56% overall averages as of me looking at the stats at least yesterday. So I would like us to target somewhere between 70% and 90% in Q4. Some observations. Some things were blocked due to prerequisites like features from other teams, budget, etc., blocked from starting, and some things were biting off more than we could chew, perhaps. So some recommendations: explicitly identify when we're blocked before as we start, so we can manage those dependencies earlier, and strive to achieve between 70 and 90% by not taking on too much as we did in Q3. What do you all think?
I agree with you. It's great. It's good to reflect on Q3 and have goals for Q4. I'm a little concerned that we'll end up trying to go in with easier to hit targets if we start the quarter thinking in that way. I'm wondering whether instead we can reassess around the 10th of December, which is not quite halfway through the milestone, if we're still blocked on things that we knew we were blocked on going in, or if any other sort of emerging blockers have come. And maybe we just reevaluate, close OKRs, reduce scope, instead of going in with easier targets.
I like it.
And the second one was just an observation. In previous years in Q4, we've missed some OKRs, and I think there's quite a lot of PTO going on. But even if our team members aren't on PTO, a lot of their counterparts, reviewers, maintainers have a lot of PTO. We lose time around the end of December, beginning of January. So we need to be realistic there as well. Adil, you had some thought.
Yeah, so extending some of the similar thoughts. So in my opinion, OKRs typically require, our commitment in certain areas for at least a quarter. And quarter is probably the first time I've done OKRs at GitLab. Typically they're half yearly or full yearly. And at least for Auth Group, at times we've missed them because of, and known pretty early on that we'll miss them because of changing or conflicting priorities. So I'm trying to get a sense of from other groups on, how do you stack rank them to say, I've got engineering OKRs around tech debt reduction, etc., or boosting maintainership. How does that stack rank with, a product roadmap OKRs, or ones that another team might bring to me, for example, 10 scale, to say, hey, we need your help in cross-join work because that ties to a CTO OKR. Because I think the progress we see at the end is ultimately a result of these trying to satisfy a bunch of them. And then the answer might just be, hey, pick less OKRs, but I'm curious on thoughts here.
What I'd say is the PM roadmap as it evolves trumps the OKRs. Like, update the OKRs to match the roadmap rather than the other way around, when we can and when it makes sense to. Also, CEO, CTO, VP, OKR sometimes should trump ours. It depends on the priority. Like, I'll give an example. Like, pre-commit secret detection is I think a CTO OKR. Amar's team is diligently working on that. I give weekly updates on that to Jorg in a public channel. So I would argue that if other things are being asked of Amar's team, which is not happening as far as I know, I'm just using that as an example, we should say no, right? Because that's a top priority OKR for various reasons. But there are other ones that, like, there was another one actually, like Adil, using an example from your team, is your team in the last quarter was people were nudging your team to work on an OKR to split out the auth functionality to a separate service and a proof of concept. And you pushed back and said, well, even though that's actually a CTO level OKR, it doesn't need to be my team. I've got these other things to work on. Maybe somebody else can work on that, on the proof of concept. And we successfully pushed that to another team that did have the time. And it all ended up being successful. So we can push back on those two. So it's a negotiation and a discussion.
Makes sense.
Does that address your thoughts?
It does. I think one thing that would help me is is I think I know my answer based on our target, which is, hey, 70% is how firm we are on OKR completion. And if that is, hey, if we could do 70% across the org, that's a fair target, then I think that answers my question. But I would ask more if it was like, hey, if we're not achieving 90% of OKRs, then that's the intent.
And even when they start to solidify, doesn't mean they can't change. So, if we're changing OKR significantly in month 3 of, a 3/4 of, in a quarter of 3 months, that tells me something. If we're doing that often or in a big way, that's a challenge. If we're changing it in week 2 or week 3, that's normal. And even in the middle of the quarter, that's normal. And as long as it's not happening too much, it's okay, in my opinion. And priorities change. We iterate on them all the time.
That's
Nate, you also have a comment.
Yeah, just on the comment around biting off more than we could chew as one of the reasons for them slipping. I just had a couple of open questions around, is this a case of us not doing enough upfront planning of the OKR to ensure it is the right goals? And also, like, what data are we using to plan out these goals, these OKRs, and make sure that they are the right goals?
As I looked at them, I think it's not that we didn't have the right ones. It's more we had too many of the right ones and needed to prioritize and cut more. But would love everybody else's opinion on that. As I looked at it holistically, that was the trend I saw.
So then, is it again not doing enough upfront planning to ensure that we don't have too many, rather than going, hey, let's put all these in and then get 2 or 3 weeks into it and go.
It's the upfront work where we were very optimistic about what we could possibly do. Too optimistic.
Yeah.
But to Phil's point earlier, we also don't want to be too pessimistic and not target enough. Yeah, we need a balance there. Thomas, your thoughts?
Yeah. First off, ditto on having too many goals. However, something that's been happening a lot, particularly in secure, is there's been a lot of newly emerging priorities and unplanned work at the start of the quarter that's trumping priorities and is crowding out capacity to work on things that we thought we were going to be able to get to towards the beginning of the quarter itself. What I have not done a very good job of, and conversely, us within the stage have not done a good job of, is when that event happens, using that to reset expectations of what we're committing to. And so that's the so I'm leaning into some of what Phil was saying earlier, but also thinking that we need to ask a bit tougher questions about what's over the horizon, or what we might predict maybe coming over the horizon as well.
Makes sense.
Nate, you asked about the data that we're using to plan OKRs. I'm not sure I understood your question. Could you just elaborate on the data you're using to plan the OKR?
Yeah, I guess, so we talked about biting off more than we can chew. So are we not planning using the right data to say, hey, this is, I don't know, whatever it is, we're trying to reduce high severity bugs by 20%, but the data says that we can only get through 10% of them in a quarter or whatever it is. Are we actually looking at that to plan them and make sure that we're not overcommitting?
That's a great question. I think sometimes we jump into what can we measure in the OKR and what can we prove within 3 months. We're going to reduce something by 10% or increase something by 10%. I think sometimes we need to look back, and we do have performance indicators. Some of them are key, some of them are regular. They're all in the handbook. Are we missing something there? Is there something additional we're trying to track? Like Thomas and I had a discussion about support requests yesterday. Is there actually a metric that we're not tracking across the entire year that we should be tracking? And then our KPI is to move the needle on that. But if we have the data, and if we have a year's worth of data, then we can make realistic targets for one quarter.
I like it.
And just for context, nobody's asking me, Wayne, why are you at 56%? Somebody might ask me that. But nobody's asking me that. I'm asking myself that. So, and it'd be reasonable if someone did, but right now, nobody is. It's more we're accountable to ourselves on this. Perhaps with the exception of the roadmap delivery ones, which which we collaborate with product management on, and we explicitly, I remember our discussion beginning of the quarter, if we have to prioritize, which ones do we make more important? The product management delivery ones. And we were much higher on those than 56%. I think we were closer to 70 or 75%, something in that range. So we did prioritize as well, which is good. So we're going to number 2. Any concerns with my outside shadow being in team day meetings next week where confidential info is not being shared, which won't be all of it, it'll just be a subset of it. Outside shadows do sign a non-disclosure agreement for what it's worth.
No issues, as long as we're remembering, we're telling people in advance and at the start of each session. For us, many of us, we're used to your shadows joining meetings. We're going to have a lot of other counterparts and individual contributors who aren't used to that. We just need to have the reminder about, safe data and what we can and can't talk about.
Thomas, I see you typing there. You want to verbalize?
Yeah. I'm admitting my sins that I have not looked extremely deep at the schedule, but are there opportunities that would be internal only, just if we're asking like to let people be themselves a bit more freely, if that makes sense, because we're introducing somebody that's nobody knows.
Yeah, and I don't want to make it awkward in the call, or people, is that confidential or not? And I would like to make the recordings, not if the recording, we're doing a huge amount of async for these. So some people were able to make the recordings public, some not. That's fine. I'll ask the shadow for the ones that are public. I'll ask them to watch those. In the discussions on the group updates, I think we'll see. I'll remind folks and say, some of this will be public, some of it won't if there's confidential topics. You never know what the question is going to come up. It says, no customer names, please. No details on OKRs. For example, those are classified as safe. So like my session on the Culture Amp survey and OKRs, I'm not going to invite the shadow. Because and the product management AMA with Hillary and Sam. I'm not going to invite the shadow because often product management roadmap stuff is not public. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But I think I'll lean towards it. And we'll see how it goes. So I'll warn people, and if it ends up being awkward, I'll remove the outside shadow. Awkward would not work. The team day going well is more important to me than the shadow being looped into some of the discussions. So I'll do it kind of opportunistically. So thanks. Adil and Nate and Amr, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't think there's any concerns, and honestly, as far as the auth group is concerned, I don't think having a new member, there'll be plenty of new folks they haven't interacted with. So I think that should be okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd be good with that. One maybe interesting perspective they could provide is as a newcomer to none of or not having knowledge about any of these, how much of a context are they able to build through the presentations that we put forth?
And that's a lot of value I get out of the shadow program, is when they're in other discussions, is that outsider's perspective is really valuable to me in my discussions. Like, how do you explain this well to somebody who has no exposure to any of the context? So cool. Thanks for the feedback. So Thomas and Phil, can you add your PI metrics covering the last 30 days to the next meeting so we can review there, like error budget, past due InfraDev, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
I think it's great that we are reviewing these. We have a monthly performance indicator review for the SEC section, which is roughly the end of every month. Can we not just align with that? Maybe bring what we've already done for that.
We do that async, right?
We do that
async.
So can we bring that monthly into this meeting for a discussion, rather than us bringing it next week, which will be the 17th, and then having to do it a week later for the PI review.
Yeah, we can do it time wise. I don't want to create extra work. And in this meeting, I'd actually rather just hear about the outliers. Like it's an outlier in a good way or an outlier in a bad way. I want to, look at all of them, tell me where we're not. Let's discuss where things are surprising in one way or another. So when do you propose we make it an agenda item for this meeting, Phil?
If you want to look at everything, I would say we do it monthly, and it's usually the last Friday of the month we do the SEC section performance indicator review. That will mean that we don't have to do it twice. We can either do it the day before that, because I think this meeting is the day before, or we can do it the following week afterwards. The second point is some of these, we're not the DRI for some of these. So sus impacting issues, that's not us, that's UX. So Justin will be doing the work for looking at that. I'm not sure
Yeah.
we need to
Let's do the ones that we watch.
What?
So we can take out the ones. So let's just do the ones where are DRI, or only the ones in scope. So like the sus impacting ones, Justin will surely bring that to our attention if that's an issue. Same thing with I can see the sus ones. It's someone that jumps out at me as maybe we don't bring it up here. So error budget, past due InfraDev, we watch that closely for availability. Maybe past due bugs, we leave that to Vinci and team to tell us. Same as sus with Justin. Past due security issues is us. And then the others, undefined merge requests, MR rate, open MR review time, and open MR age, I think are good for us to do. So we leave out past due bugs and past due sus impacting issues.
Can I suggest we don't do the last three, MR8, OMRT, and OMA? That's part of the SEC section monthly review. I'm not sure we need to discuss it here as well.
If it's an exception, I'd like to hear if it's an exception. I don't think that async review works. I don't know if anybody actually reads it. And if it, I'd like to make it a point to have a sync discussion on the outliers so they don't get away from us.
Awesome. Can we do that in this meeting following the async review? Thomas and I
like
are
it.
putting that information together, and there's a document, and then in the following meeting,
Just point at it, like point at the work already. I don't want to create busy work. Point at the work already done. And in this meeting, bring up any outliers. And then let's discuss them. How does that sound?
sounds good. I think, yeah, everyone agree.
So the next one will be last week of this month. Is that good timing?
By last week of the month, you're not talking last full week of the month with US Thanksgiving.
After the next async PI
sorry.
review.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
sorry.
but it's a good point. So it might be the first week of December instead, but
Yeah.
after the next async PI review, whenever that is. Okay.
And just to make sure I'm understanding the ask and reset, when we talk about discussing the outliers, to me, that's talking about teams that are outliers. And that's what we would be doing a sync discussion of here.
It could be stage level, it could be team
Okay.
level, and yeah, it could be either, whatever you think is the best, whatever you're noticing that you want to bring up.
Okay.
So like for error budget, it might be this group is been behind on error budget for the last 2 months and we're working on it, and here's the issues we're working on. And maybe we need help to get ahead of the issues causing the error budget reduction. Or it might be,
Okay.
oh, we've got more past due InfraDevs than we were hoping to have by this point. So we're going to work on that. Maybe we make an OKR about it. I'm making stuff up, right? Or, oh, the past due security issues. Well, it's because, we get a whole bunch that end up being things that there are no upstream vendor patches available. So we're working on automating better our divergence requests, things like that. It'd probably be more at the staged level than the group level, unless you want to bring up group.
Okay.
It doesn't need to be a
not
group
all,
by group. It could be a stage by stage thing.
and not all outliers are bad. Some are like exceedingly good. And so
Absolutely. Sounds good. And this is also what this comes out of is Christopher would ask me about these. every month or so when they're outliers. And now that's not happening. So I want to not lose track of those. The discussion of outliers. That's where this stems from. It's not because there's some trend of problems. It's more to avoid that from happening. So let's review the latest on this other doc. It's just an opportune time. And I think this is open to all of GitLab. I don't think anything is Umar or Dill or Nate, can you confirm? Yeah, I see Umar. I see your face in the document.
Yep.
Google Doc. Yeah, okay. So it's open. So we were talking about a little context is we were working with Andrew and the infrastructure team, that him and his team managing all the vulnerabilities that are discovered and reported in the infrastructure maintained code. And he found some opportunities to improve. So the first one here, as I read through it, is that there were a large number of vulnerabilities that are no longer found, and Andrew didn't know there was a bulk update option to do it 100 at a time, so he can clean it up, and he's planning to do it, but he hasn't done it yet. I'm looking at the notes, but it's good. He didn't know about that bulk update capability, and now he does. So yay! And he's going to work on it because I think they have hundreds of things they know have been fixed, and they want to separate out the signal from the noise by marking the ones that are fixed but aren't marked as so. He wants to mark them as fixed so he can pay attention to the others. The second item was Andrew working with the security. I think the security vulnerability management team, not in development, but in security, is they were importing third-party results, scanner results, and they weren't being imported correctly and processed correctly. There was actually a syntax error in the input data, and he was going to escalate to that team because the new reports were not actually going into the system. So look for either new things or things that have been fixed. And it looks like Andrew's saying that's been fixed. Yay. That's a lot. That was most of Andrew's pain and infrastructure, those two. Phil, why don't you cover number 3 and where we're at on that?
I will. Number 3, right, the auto resolve functionality. Yep. So I've chatted with Alana around priorities. Alana reviewed the video and said, wow, it was painful to watch. So it's really useful. So thank you for recording. We were able to share that video with Alana. There might be a possibility to move some things around if we get blocked on other work. So the focus and the roadmap for Threat Insights is making the improvements in the UI around grouping and sorting and filtering the vulnerability report. So that leads on from the bulk status update, which is recently being delivered. If they get blocked on that, Alana will be looking to bring forward the auto resolve functionality for vulnerabilities that are no longer found in the main branch. Something Alana really wants to do, and we've just given her one more reason to consider that.
Cool. Thomas, you want to cover number 4? I don't know if you've gotten a chance to look at yet.
I have not, and this was a good prompt for me to go back and look through it. Is there an issue to turn off or disable specific rules by comment within code? There is. It has existed for a while. I have not. It is buried within the backlog in static analysis. I will. I'm hunting for it now, so that while this is top of mind.
Cool. And maybe just tag Andrew in it so he can put his thoughts on it as well. I think it's good. And 5th item of 5.
Yeah, so it highlighted a problem where the pipeline had finished running and then the artifact couldn't be uploaded because of a syntax error. Andrew identified that that's really hard to find, and it took him a long time to work out what the problem was. We have an issue for it. It's something, as Thomas mentioned, that has been discussed a fair bit. We're not sure how to solve that problem because uploading the artifact runs after all the jobs have finished. You'd have to introduce a new job to parse the format of it. But we've got people looking at it now, which is great. So we've got the issue there. I've linked to it. We'd love some more thoughts and ideas on how to solve that problem.
Cool. Thanks, Thomas and Phil, for walking through this. It was one of my action items to say, check on this, make sure these things are still moving along, and they are. I know you don't have a lot of the context, Nate and Adil, and Umar, but any thoughts on any of these or any impressions? It was really
Yeah,
great. Have an internal user give us a lot of great feedback, and he learned some stuff about our capabilities, but also gave us a lot of great feedback on how we can improve. But you were saying, Umar?
yeah, I think I might have found the one from the backlog that Thomas you're looking for. I dropped it under 4C. Do you want to double check if that's the right one? And then while we're going through that, on the auto resolution for vulnerabilities front, I saw that the auto resolution for vulnerabilities of deprecated and remove analyzers was linked. We're making progress on that. One thing that we identified is we won't be able to use this functionality as a post analyzer because of the way that our process is to remove analyzers. So we had floated the idea of using a migration. None of that is set in stone yet. We want to iron out what the actual process of removing an analyzer looks like, and then review where we would inject auto resolution within that process. So that's something Craig is actively working on. We'll have more information on how that would look like, hopefully within the next couple weeks.
Cool. Thanks, Umar. So I know we're over on time. I think we can cover our confidential items, of which there's just two small ones, quickly. So I'll stop the recording, and if Emil and Nate and Adil, you could drop, that'd be great. And talk again in a week.
Thank you.